All right, Dr. West is here. I'm ready whenever you are, Dr. West. All right, I'll bring you in.
My wonderful folk in Mississippi, we were going at it. I said, I got to get Sister Sabby now. Ain't no doubt about that. But, oh, what a blessing to see you.
All right, Dr. West. So, guys, Dr. West is back. For those of you, I'm sure you all know this. We've talked about it oftentimes, but Dr. West is running for president for 2024 through the Green Party. Dr. West, the last time you were here, there were less rumblings than there are now. Like, obviously, you're getting a lot more attention than you did at first when you've announced, and also to the point where I saw this recently. Someone sent this to me. You are actually having a rally coming up in Jackson, Mississippi. This is August 25th. So I want to hear a little bit about that, this rally that's coming up this week.
Oh, indeed. But I first want to begin by saluting you, my dear sister, for your courage, your vision, your brilliance, your consistency. That me and Anahita, we watch you religiously and regularly, and we are inspired and empowered by your words and your deeds. And this is very important because, you know, we cutting so radically against the grain that we got to recognize that we in this together. Solidarity really matters. And I want to say that to you directly. Now, it's true. I was just with my precious folk down in Mississippi. That's why I'm running a little late, because it's not so much a launching, but it is my first public event. And I wanted to begin with the magnificent brothers and sisters in gut bucket, sophisticated, unbelievable Mississippi. Why? Because Emmett Till's family is having the memorial. And so I'm really going as a servant. I'm not going in as some presidential candidate focused on a campaign. No. I'm coming in to learn, listen with a humility and a genuine sense of acknowledging the greatness of those folk in Mississippi, not just the Emmett Tills, but we talking about Medgar Evers and, of course, Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others. We ain't got the Sam Cooke born in Clarksdale. Ooh, or Reverend C.L. Franklin, Aretha's fathers who born in Mississippi, or David Ruffin from Why Not, Mississippi, and the Delta that produced the greatest art form of the 20th century, which is the blues, with Son House and Robert Johnson and others that Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith would pick up on. So I wanted to start in Mississippi to get my soul right.
Yeah, so this goes back to the movement building, because I think some people, enough time has passed where, I hate to say it, but like Flint, Michigan, I feel like some people have forgotten about the people in Jackson, Mississippi and the water crisis that they've had to go through.
That's exactly. And you know what happened to our dear brother Eddie Jenkins and Michael Parker, the brutalization that's taken place, the guilty verdict. And so I'll be there with Brother Malik Shabazz. I'm going to be there with Brother Walker, the lawyer. I'm going to be there with my dear brother Raheem Mohammed. I'm going to be there with Coach Andrew Campbell. I'm going to be there with Sister Priscilla Sterling, who's part of the Teal family. It's a united front that is concerned about ensuring that we never forget about not so much the murder of our dear brother Emmett Till, but the dignity of Emmett Till and the magnificent vision and courage of his mother, Mom.
Mm-hmm. So that is, again, for people, I just want to reiterate here that
now this particular rally is really that's something I'm kind of pushing aside, because it turns out that same moment they wanted me to be at the museum for the film itself, and so okay. I've actually shifted now and said no, I'm there mainly to be a servant in terms of being at the museum. We're going to be at New Hope Baptist Church on Sunday. We're having a magnificent gathering at the Black Brothers in the afternoon. We're having a hearing in Randall, Rankin County. That's where it is, Rankin County. And it's also a tribute to my pastor, Reverend Willie P. Cook, who baptized me 62 years ago. He's from Brookhaven, Mississippi, right where Lamar Smith was shot down like a dog. But just like Mamie Till and the others, don't have a minute to hate. I pursue justice for the rest of my life. We gonna keep alive a tradition, a great tradition of a great people. And Mississippi, in many ways, has been ground zero when you really think about it for Black people. The blackest state. Black folk have probably caught more hell in Mississippi. I know South Carolina is competitive, and Georgia too. But black folk have caught more hell in Mississippi. And anytime you're targeted in that way from the powers that be, you know you're a threat. You know you're a threat, because when you wake up and organize and straighten your back up and bear witness to a love that hatred can never suffocate and crush, then, oh, lo and behold, you got something. And we know there is no Black Chicago without Mississippi. We won't get into that right now, but Black Chicago is basically a Mississippi affair. No doubt. Thank God for Curtis Mayfield. Thank God for Dinah Washington and all of the others. But it is a very much a Mississippi thing. I think Dinah actually may have been Alabama. But I mean, Mississippi is disproportionately shaping of the great genius of the Black folk on the south side and west side of Chicago. So I'm just very blessed to be there and to begin. And that's why I'm just blessed to have, thank God, a fire that all the lies can never put out. You know what I mean? When you have a certain kind of intensity of calling that all the bows and arrows and even the bullets can't stop. Because you got a joy inside of you that the joy can't take away. You got a commitment to justice that nobody can undermine, nobody can alleviate. And that's a beautiful thing, because that frees you up. It frees you up. And you recognize whatever faults and foibles you have, all of us have them. But at the same time, when I think of this brother right here, John Coltrane, when I think of those who came before, who poured so much in us, I think of your mama. I think of my mama. Think of your daddy. Think of my daddy. And of course, I think of your blessed husband and others who love you. Love is a deeply human thing. It cuts all the way down through our hearts and minds and souls. That's what keeps us going. It's not about some narrow conception of politics and an election. It's about a movement that connects to the wretched of the earth in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. We got to be truth tellers and justice seekers, no matter how they try to fit us into these little narrow debates about two parties and narrow debates about being a spoiler of a rotten system and narrow debates about how you're going to fit in and relate to some narrow Black leadership that doesn't want to tell the truth, that's on the gravy train rather than the love train in so many instances. I still love them. They just sold out. I love sellouts. I'm a Christian. I love everybody. Everybody can bounce back, but you got to tell the truth.
Well, speaking of, and this interesting, because like speaking of telling the truth, so we predicted that this would happen because you're running as a third party candidate. Even if you were running in the Democratic Party, they would do this too, because Joe Biden, Democrat, sitting in the White House. So recently, you did respond to this on Twitter, but I want to get your response here for the audience as well. So obviously, ABC News, and it actually started with the Daily Beast. They put out a smear piece against you, saying that you owe $500,000 in taxes and in child support. And I just want to give you the opportunity to respond to this yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, one, it was, of course, the lie about the commitment to my children. You see, that to me is fighting words. That the depth of my love and commitment to my children has been a fundamental motivation in my life, and so that particular lie had to hit head on. And my precious daughter's mother's been the first one. She's called a number of the folk to tell them how big a lie that is. Now, I've always said that I'm broke as the Ten Commandments financially, because money doesn't mean that much to me. That when I do get it, it usually flows rather quickly, because I've got a number of different obligations, a number of different debts. And so in that sense, when we talk about the taxes, it's true, but I always have agreements in place so that I'm able to keep moving. And those agreements are very real. Those agreements are very concrete. Like 63% of my precious fellow citizens in the country, I live from paycheck to paycheck. Absolutely. I've been blessed. My paychecks are bigger. Ain't no doubt about that than most of my fellow citizens. But my debts are bigger too. No doubt about that too. So that in that regard, you know, all they're trying to do is to kind of hit you below the belt with these ad hominem attacks. Somehow this is an attack on my character. No, I've always been broken. I'll probably be broke the day I die. I put on my cemetery clothes every day. I'm coffin ready every day. I know if I'm telling the truth about a hated people, of black people, black love is a crime in a white supremacist world. I know that. I'm just willing to bear that cost and that cross. Not because I'm so good. This ain't no vanity project. He's narcissist. He's concerned. No, not at all. I find great joy in telling the truth that focuses on the least of these, because I come out of Shiloh Baptist Church, and I come out of being shaped by the Black Panther Party, and I come out of a conception of moral and spiritual greatness that sits at the core of who Fannie Lou Hamer was and Martin Luther King Jr. was. That's my standards. That's like playing the saxophone, and Charlie Parker and Coltrane are the standards. Or trying to sing a song, and Aretha Franklin and Mahalia Jackson are the standards. That vision of greatness fundamentally informs my own sense of calling. It's true in the classroom. It's true when I go to jail. It's true when I'm on the streets. It's true when I go to church, and I'm a hang loose Baptist, so it's true when I'm in the nightclub doing my thing.
I think what some people may not, what some people may assume. Some people may assume because they see you on TV, because you know you're a professor, you're an author. I think that some people may assume, well, Cornel West is probably making a lot of money, so why is it that he would still owe taxes or child support, etc. What I tried to explain to people the other day is that just because you have a balance doesn't mean you don't have some type of payment arrangement or whatever in place, especially when it comes to taxes, because I know a lot of people have like a payment arrangement in place. But also, that being said, I think it's important for people to understand that it is not uncommon when you are coming from particularly the Black community, and let's say you are the first one in the family to, I know this from experience, if you're the first one in the family to go to college, get the college education, and to get like that professional career, it is not uncommon that you then in turn will try to help out other people, whether it's in your family or in the community as well. In other words, like you're going to pay it forward. So for me, for example, my aunt helped me out. She was the first to go to college. I was the first to actually finish. And then I helped my sister. Yeah. So I think this is something that a lot of people may not understand, especially if you're coming from families where you don't have like that generational wealth, or you don't have a legacy in your family at some of these colleges, especially when you're the first to go. Everybody kind of looking at you. And then, of course, you want to help people as well. So what I want people to understand is, just because you may be making a lot more than some of us, that still doesn't mean that you don't have debts that you have to tend to as well. But I feel like this smear that they have actually put towards you, if you weren't running as a third party candidate, or if you weren't running the president at all, nobody was trying to look up this information. So they did this to Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi was just here recently, and the IRS came to his house. So I was asking him about that as well.
No, it's very real. It's very real. And I do believe that all of us ought to pay our fair share of taxes, and especially the top 1%, because most of them pay very, very little. Some of them don't pay anything at all. But back to your point, you know, I have to acknowledge that. I mean, the fees and liabilities when you get behind does push you into a pit. That's very real. And I must say that, you know, I did have waves of audits, and I always wondered, you know, what was going on. I got a call. I got a knock on my door Christmas Eve with a subpoena to pay my taxes, right before Santa Claus gonna show up the next morning. I'm thinking, like, how come you all can't wait until after the holiday is over? Why? Well, it was just this sense that, we keeping track of you. Okay, I understand it. They've been kind enough to be open to the agreements, and I've followed through the agreements the best that I can, and therefore I continue in the process of paying my taxes like every citizen should, or at least so chooses. I mean, you got some Quakers and others that might not want to pay their taxes because too much going to war. Well, I understand that argument, but generally speaking, for me, I'm committed to paying. But I do recognize that anybody, Brother Matt or anybody else, it could be, a number of voices out there speaking the truth, that there is a certain kind of folk keeping track of what you're saying and what's going on that you can't be naive about. You don't know exactly for sure, but you can't be naive about it. But most importantly, you can't be preoccupied with that. You got to focus on the strength that you have. And I come from a biblical tradition. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added to you, which is to say, as long as you're true to your calling, somehow you will be able to keep going and gain access to resources, even if you broke the 10 Commandments every month, every year. And that's been true for me for 50 years now, you see. 50 years.
I think one of the questions that did come my way in reference to the child support is, I think some people may have wondered if your children are adults now. Some people are asking,
yes, absolutely.
Some people are asking, like, why do you even have? How could you have to pay child support if your kids are adults?
Well, that's why it's a lie. That case was closed a long time ago, and not only that, but I am of the disposition that I do far beyond what is required for my children. That's just what it is to be a West. You know what I mean? That's what it is to be shaped by my family and so forth. So that's why that was probably the most troubling and disturbing aspect of the lie. But, Sister Sabby, more lies ought to come. There's no doubt about it. You got to fortify yourself. You got to be armed. You got to put on the full armor, as Ephesians 6 says. And most importantly, you can't be discouraged. You can't. They're trying to somehow steal some of your fire, and they're trying to somehow lessen some of your commitment. Whereas for me, it's the opposite. Gives me more fire, gives me more background, gives me more willingness to speak the truth. But it also, I begin to see in a very concrete way, in a personal manner, just how rotten the system is. That they're really not concerned about what I'm pointing to. I'm pointing to mass incarceration and the brothers and sisters disproportionately black and brown there. I'm pointing to the hoods and the ghettos and the reservations. I'm pointing to working people who are being pushed against the wall. That's what I'm pointing to. With the discourse about these particular taxes and so forth, take us away from that. And I do believe that's why I addressed it and so forth. But you can imagine, you see, the Democratic Party, the last thing they want is to be measured by the degree to which they have delivered for poor people, delivered for working people, delivered for those folk in various parts of the world who are subjugated by U.S. imperial policies from the vantage point of Palestinians or anybody else. And I myself am committed to never, ever selling any oppressed people down the river. I don't care what color, I don't care what gender, I don't care what nation, and so forth. It could be Dalits in India, it could be Roma in Europe, it could be Jews in Russia, it could be Palestinians on the West Bank, it could be black folk in Harlem, it could be poor white in Appalachia, it could be Spanish speaking in East Los Angeles, it could be Asians in Minneapolis. That's what it is to try to be a love warrior and a freedom fighter. That's what Martin was about. That's what Malcolm was about. That's what Fannie Lou was about and Ella Baker was about. We'll never reach their level of greatness. We know what the standards are. And so we look at ourselves through the lens of those standards. And they're beautiful standards. Vito
Yes.
Marcantonio, the great Italian brother who was a lawyer for W.B. Du Bois, is one of the greatest freedom fighters of the 20th century. Well, he's tied to Italy. You ain't lying. Because the Italians got some serious brothers and sisters tied to truth telling and justice seeking. So is true with the Irish. So is true with the English. So is true with the Belgian Congo brothers. So is true with the South Africans. So is true with the Lithuanians, the Ethiopians, the Guatemalans, the Mexicans. It is a human thing, but the sad thing is most of human history is the history of hatred and greed and domination and subjugation. So we're trying to create those moments of interruption. And that's what love does. That's what justice does. And democratic experiments, when poor people and working people have self-determination, that creates new possibilities vis-a-vis domination, subjugation, exploitation. But we know, unfortunately, very sadly, that the powers that be, they're mighty. They're not almighty, but they're mighty. And they try to crush folk. So when people say, "Oh, Brother West, you're a threat," I hear Brother Carvel and hear Brother Axelrod and Sister John Wash and others. "Oh, you a threat to our status quo." I say, you don't say. That's a wonderful thing. That's one of the things I'm trying to do. Not because the focus is on me, because you're crushing people. Because people are not able to live lives of dignity. I'm just pointing that out. I'm just a vessel. I'm just a vehicle. I'm just a conduit of a great tradition of a great people. That's all.
That's right. So, I totally get where you're coming from, but I gotta ask.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And I appreciate you, because that's part of your integrity as a critical thinker, as well as a lover of Black people, oppressed people, struggling folk, trying to live lives of dignity. So we appreciate what you do, Sister Sabby.
So speaking of threat, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm going to show you two polls tonight. This first one that I want to show you, this is the Economist/YouGov poll. So this was August 12th through August 15th. And I want to show you this because this is very telling. This is after you announced this number was not the same before. If an election for president was going to be held now and the Democratic nominee was Joe Biden and the Republican nominee was Donald Trump, who would you vote for? I want you to show you other. This is very telling. When we look at other, if we go all the way over to African Americans, 10% of African Americans said they would choose other, not Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And I wanted to show you this, Dr. West, because this is the poll that Simone Sanders and Caitlin from CNN and Anderson Cooper and all those guys, they are not showing people this poll, but I can guarantee you the DNC has probably seen this, and that is what they are afraid of. That is why they consider you to be a threat. If they showed this poll to their viewers, people say, "Oh my God, 10% of African Americans." And just to show people something else, if we were to look at Donald Trump, 17% of African Americans said they would vote for Trump. If you add the two together, that's 27%. Then we have 13% of African Americans that said they would not vote. But what I think the Democratic Party is more afraid of, and why they keep telling people you're a spoiler or you're going to give us Donald Trump, is because you're in double digits here. African Americans will not vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. They will vote for other. And that is why I believe they're coming after you. I think it's important for people to see those numbers.
That's a powerful point. I know you made that last night. Me and Anahita were checking you out last night. That was the first time I ever seen that. I don't know anybody else who actually has access to that. I don't know how you got access to that. But that's the kind of investigation that you do of a high level. But no, if it's 10% now, shoot, by Christmas it might be 15, maybe 20. Why? Because people are making choices. Biden and the Democratic Party don't own Black people's vote. They don't own anybody's vote. You earn it. You earn it.
Right.
Present your case. Lay out your vision. See what people, how they respond. Now, as you know, over 40% of our fellow citizens don't vote at all.
Yeah.
I'm going to them. 1 out of 8 of those who supported Trump supported Brother Bernie. I'm going to Trump country, as I've said from the very beginning. Trump's followers are not gangsters like him, not all of them. They're not all neo-fascists like him. They cannot stand the arrogance and the haughtiness of the Democratic Party. They can't stand the hypocrisy of it, and they can't stand the indifference of the professional managerial class to the plight of those who never went to college. What's the percent of the folk in our country that never went to college? 60-some%.
Yeah.
And their lives are just as precious as lives at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Berkeley, University of Chicago. And so in that sense, things are really movable. There's no doubt about that. They're movable. Trump showed that with the Republican Party's establishment. He shattered that establishment. And now there's former social base significantly, not exclusively, followed the neo-fascist Pied Piper. The Democratic Party's establishment has yet to undergo that kind of full erosion, but it is happening. So all the litmus tests of the establishment. That's why you get so many progressives come along, and they come in so full of fire in the Democratic Party. We're going to be revolutionaries and subversives. We're going to transform these folk. And after 2.5 years, you say, ooh, what happened to your fire? You used to be so strong talking about the humanity of the Palestinians. Now you can't say a mumbling word when 550 of those babies are killed in 50 years and you were on fire, and now you can't say nothing. What's going on? You used to be more critical of Wall Street. Now it's just a rhetorical gesture. You used to be more critical of the anti-democratic processes in the Democratic Party. Now you're siding with their mainstream. Hey, this is a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right.
Yep.
Let's call this out. I'm not demonizing anybody. I'm simply saying accountability, the kind of thing you do every night, is crucial. Answerability, fundamental. Responsibility, unescapable. And that's the kind of thing people are tired of, though, my dear sister.
Yeah.
They're tired of it,
One of the biggest concerns that Americans have right now is the economy, right? Because of inflation. Every week I've gone to the grocery store, the prices are higher every week, it seems like. And I think a lot of people, when they're polled, they say that their number one issue is the economy. They're not happy with the Biden administration's economic policies. So one of the questions that I have in reference to policy, what would you do differently if you were president? What would your economic policy look like?
I mean, one thing, I would shatter the kind of chatter you get among the intellectuals who are trying to rationalize Biden's economic policy, saying this is the best that it gets. 3% unemployment. People ought to be happy. He's the greatest figure since FDR. And I said, when was the last time you walked the street? I live on 110th Street in Harlem. So when I walk out of my building, I'm walking over some of the precious homeless brothers and sisters. When is the last time you actually went in the workplace and saw the speed up and saw the unbelievable cutbacks and saw the unbelievable escalation of monies at the top for CEOs and so forth? So don't tell us how magnificent the economy is because you trot out some statistics that are unconcerned about the struggling human beings who are beneath those statistics. So what does that mean then? It means we need massive investment, and it doesn't take a rock scientist really to make this point. We need massive investment in human beings in the form of Medicare for all, and free college tuition and education. Decent housing, social housing, public housing, jobs with a living wage, escalating the minimum wage to a living wage of 20 and 22 and 25, and massive slashing of military spending because you can't separate foreign policy from domestic policy.
That's right.
But Brother Martin said those bombs dropped in Vietnam land in ghettos, what he meant was not just guns versus butter, but he meant a militarizing orientation to problems. That's how you get Cop City. You already got militarized police department. Now you want to militarize it more with tremendous investment in military. But where's the concern about the mental health of the brothers and sisters? Where's the concern about housing? Where's the concern about quality relations within community? How do you push back the guns? How do you push back the hopelessness? And yet military expansion deeply affirmed by both parties, just like Wall Street profit affirmed by both parties. So that I come in talking about old Martin Luther King Jr. stuff. Let's abolish poverty. Oh my God, that's what, how much would it take? Well, about 210 billion or so. That's nothing compared to the trillions of dollars we spend on military. Let's abolish homelessness. Let's make sure that quality education is available, not in rhetoric, but in massive investment. Biden provides wonderful investment in infrastructure. He marginalized the kind of thing Bernie was talking about, which had to do much more with people. Why? Because he's much more receptive to Manchin than he is progressives. Progressives are window dressing of a rotten Democratic Party that's characterized by corporate greed and military adventurism abroad. That's what they stand for. And they use progressives every 4 years to try to bring in folk, and people are tired of it. I was brought in myself in the past a number of times. I supported Nader, I supported Jill Stein, I supported Biden, I supported Obama. Why? Because I figured that was the best and the left couldn't do it. Well, I got to be self-critical too, because we're all making our choices relative to circumstances and context, right? But if all we get is a two-party system, democracy will run out of gas. The two-party system is a major impediment for democracy. People tell me we got to save democracy, save democracy. Yes, but do you think you save democracy by putting out these milquetoast politicians with neoliberal policies as the only opposition to this escalating fascism? The fascism will sooner or later take over, because if it's only Tweedledum and freaking frack, then it will continually go back and forth, Republicans and Democrats, and they'll say, oh, Sister Sabby, Brother West, we understand what you're talking about. There's some deep truths in what you're saying, but now is not the right time. Then when is the right time? 5 years from now? 10, 15, 20, 25, 30? They told Frederick Douglass the same thing in the 1850s. You got to choose between two slaveholders, Henry Clay, James Polk. Well, one got a liberal version of slavery, other got a conservative version of slavery. What you gonna do, Fred? Third party, Liberty Party. The slow makings of what would become the Republican Party. Republican Party began as what? Third party.
Yep.
That's Lincoln. And Lincoln took tremendous pressure and Harriet Tubman and William Lloyd Garrison and Lydia Maria Child. I mean, they had to put Lydia Maria Child's legacy. All of those abolitionists putting pressure on Lincoln. But it's that pressure in the name of precious everyday people, in the language of the great Sly Stone. That's the key. And we got to bear witness to that in our own distinctive ways. You know what I mean?
Dr. West, have you ever seen, like, I want to transition a little bit here into poverty, since we started off with economics. Have you ever seen, there was a show that came on back in the day, but I used to watch it on like TV Land, like as I got older. It was called Good Times. You familiar with the show Good Times?
Oh, you mean with Jimmy Walker?
Yep.
Yeah. I love the mother. I love the mother in that show, though. One of the few shows that Hollywood produced that had to do with everyday Black people. And I give that credit to Norman Lear. That was Norman Lear who played that crucial role.
Right. And what's important, what people may not understand is, so Good Times was about a Black family. They lived in Southside Chicago. They lived in the projects. The actor John Amos, who played the father on the sitcom, he left the show. And the way they had him leave the show was James died. Right. So that's typical storyline. John Amos years later explained that one of the reasons why he left the show was because he felt like the family never got a leg up. Every time something good happened, they got another setback by something bad. He was like, they never got out of poverty. They never got out of the projects. But to the producer's credit, that is the reality for most people. most people don't get out of poverty in this country. And so I understand where he was coming from as an actor, but there is this constant cycle of poverty that happens in this country. And I'm curious, like, how would you tackle that? So, for example, the $90 million that's being used to build Cop City, how do you feel that money could be used in other places if we're talking about poverty?
Well, see, because I believe that poverty is a crime against humanity, and I'm anti-crime, which means then that be guaranteed income, be it a whole creative sets of policies that will ensure that people can never go below a certain level. And this is not new. I just got back from Sweden with my precious mother-in-law. And Sweden and others had this under Olof Palme way back in the 70s and 80s. Now they only got 10 million people. New York got almost 10. So they got the same population in New York City. So people say, oh, it's different in scope. That's true. That's true. But no, it's the commitment. It's the commitment, you see. And think of it this way, that the U.S. Army and the U.S. military, they actually have a form of socialism. They take care of those folk. What is the poverty rate at West Point? What is the poverty rate in U.S. bases? We got 800 military bases around the world in over 100 countries. What is the poverty rate on all of those military units? Zero.
Yep.
Zero. What's the poverty rate of U.S. Congress? Zero. Guaranteed income. Now, we got to use that model for everyday people. Why? Because, you know, the present status quo says our military have the highest priority. I said, ooh. What happens when the people have the highest priority over the profits and so forth? What happens when you have warped priorities that get reshaped? Now, that's called revolution. People say, oh, Brother West, this is revolution. Yes, it is revolution. What is revolution? The sharing of power. People wouldn't choose to be poor if they had other choices.
That's
It's
right.
the sharing of resources. They wouldn't choose to be thoroughly broke. I'm sorry, but I got my thing just broke on me here. But be thoroughly broke. They wouldn't choose to live lives that are beneath dignity, even though they have an inherent dignity that no circumstance could ever wipe out. So that, yes, it is revolution. It's a massive transfer of power, resources, and dignity to poor and working people. That's
Well
revolution.
said.
That's why
Well
I am
said.
a revolutionary Christian. Now, the Christian is the noun and revolutionary is the adjective. We won't go into all that right now, but I just believe that in the end, my dear sister, any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. If the love is not in it, if the genuine care and concern is not in it, the careerists will take over. The opportunists will take over. The mercenaries will take over. And they'll use justice language, but they won't have the deep love in their heart, the concern about empowering poor people. You see, so that love supreme that Coltrane talked about, see, that is inseparable from justice. They're not identical, but they're inseparable. And that's what we learned from the history of Black people. Because there's been no other people in 400 years being so hated, teach the world so much about love.
One of the questions I have.
That's why I'm going to Mississippi. Emmett Till's mama, Miss Till, what did she say? I don't have a minute to hate. I'll pursue justice for the rest of my life. Miss Till, where do you get that power from? I got it from a spiritual achievement of the best of a people that loved in the face of hatred and wanted freedom for everybody in the face of terror and wanted healing for everybody in the face of trauma and wanted joy for everybody in the face of sorrow. That's Louis Armstrong. That's Mahalia Jackson. That's Phyllis Hyman. That's Donny Hathaway. That's Curtis Mayfield. That's the Dramatics and the Delphonics and the Whispers and Enchantment and the Jones Girls and the Emotions. They just not artists who entertain. They are love warriors who are spreading healing of a deeply wounded people. So that the best of our music has a spill over into the best of our politics. Look at our politicians compared to our musicians. The politicians had 15% of the courage of our great musicians. We'd have different kind of leadership.
Yeah. Well, one of the
Different kind of
questions
leadership.
in reference to leadership, we were just talking about the situation in Hawaii, and one of
Yes.
the things that we're pointing out is that Joe Biden still to this day has not visited East Palestine, Ohio, and he was just recently in Hawaii, and it was not a good look for him. He got there kind of late too, so a lot of the residents in Maui are very upset, and they feel like they've been forgotten about. Meanwhile, there's billions of dollars going to Ukraine. The Biden administration is offering people in Maui $700 per household. So people are very upset. If you were president, how would you have handled those two situations? The situation in East Palestine, Ohio, with the chemicals that are spread through the community and the people are getting sick, and the wildfires in Hawaii.
Well, I was just blessed to be there with my dear wife, Anahita. We had a wonderful lecture tour with native Hawaiians. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing this past December. And just be able to look in their eyes and give them a hug and be empowered by their struggle means that, again, they must have a high priority. The same kind of priority that not just Ukraine, but Egypt, Israel, and other major recipients of U.S. taxpayer money. So it's very clear. You can always see what kind of value that people put on lives in terms of how many resources they make available to people. You see. And same was true in Africa. Same was true in various parts of Latin America and so on. Now, the fact that Hawaii actually is part of the United States, of course, the history of colonization is one that we could always aware of, in Hawaii and Cuba and Puerto Rico and Guam becoming part of the the transcontinental imperial America after the 13 colonies became 48 states. That is still very clear that a Hawaiian life, especially a native Hawaiian life, doesn't have the same value as a white life. See, that's what white supremacy is in the most concrete form. And we have to be honest about that. Now, it's not static and stationary. People can change. You put pressure on people, they can change. There's no doubt about that. Biden himself has come a long way since the 1960s and 70s, hanging out with Strom Thurmond and John Stetis and Jesse Helms and so forth and so on. I don't mind having friends of different politics and so on, but you also tell them the truth. I disagree with you here. This kind of white supremacy, this kind of homophobia, this kind of transphobia. We can still be human beings and connect, but I'm not putting up with it. I'm not putting up with it. But no, when you got bills together and creating crimes against humanity called the mass incarceration regime, or eliminating welfare, allowing credit card companies to gain access to big, huge amounts of profits and a fail-safe such that they don't have to undergo bankruptcy. I mean, all these different policies that have come through Biden's own career that have been crushing poor and working people. And it's fascinating to me to see so many of both the progressives as well as black politicians acting as if he's Martin Luther King Jr.'s second cousin on the vanilla side of town or something. Say, no, tell the truth about it. Tell the truth about him. What war has he ever opposed? What military budget has he ever fought against? None whatsoever. Meaning what? Meaning that still, is he better than Trump? Well, yeah, of course he is on a whole host of issues. Our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and trans and reproductive rights. Yes, of course, we're not naive about this. But he could push us into World War III, just like Trump can push us to the Second Civil War. So that's our choice between the Second Civil War and World War III. We've got to find another way. This two-party system is crushing us. We've got to find alternatives. We have to have alternative voices. And most importantly, those voices must be voices that go beyond the hatred and revenge and ugliness of our gangsterized politics. So that integrity, honesty, decency, love, not perfection. We're always going to have faults and foibles. We're always going to fall on our faces and try again, fail again, and fail better, as the great Samuel Beckett put it. but at least you have some moments of statespersonship. And that's what's missing. That's why almost one half of our fellow citizens want nothing to do with politics. It's just nothing but just war by other means. The gangsters are running things, and it has no possibility of redemption.
But what would you, so two things, but specifically, like, how would you handle those particular situations differently? East Palestine, Ohio, Biden has not visited, and Hawaii, people feel like he showed up there late and he's not giving them enough money, obviously, compared to what's being given to Ukraine.
Oh, no, that's what I said. It would be a matter of presence, resources, and follow through. Presence, resources, and follow through. And by follow through, what I mean is putting in place policies that would ensure that people would be equipped to deal with subsequent problems that would flow from what they're dealing with now. Because, of course, the backdrop of Hawaii is very much the backdrop of imperial policies and corporate greed. The transformation of the land into plantations tied to production of goods, be it bananas or whatever it is, that characterize so much of the history of the worst of Hawaii. Now, the history of the best of Hawaii has been community building, has been resistance to the corporate greed, and so on. So you also have to engage in truth telling. I mean, unfortunately, politics is like war. Truth is the first casualty. Injustice is usually the second. So you have to have leaders who would just tell the people the truth. I understand why you find yourself in this situation. These imperial policies, this corporate greed has pushed it in a certain direction. Same is true with the fossil fuel companies vis-a-vis ecological catastrophe. You got to tell the story of why we're getting all of these fires. And I'm in Los Angeles, right? We got hurricane and earthquake same day.
So one thing I would recommend, this just a suggestion that I would recommend is, I personally would not say, like, if it were me, I would not say that Biden is better than Trump. I think they're pretty much the same. I think
particular issues.
Well, I think that one is covert and one is overt. I think that Trump was more overt about his beliefs and his ideas, and I felt like Biden is more covert about it. For example, Biden said a lot of good things about what he planned to do for the climate and green energy, but at the same time, Joe Biden approved the Willow Project and drilling off of the coast of Texas as well. So he's more covert about it, right? Whereas Trump is a little bit more vocal and says, no, I'm not dealing with this climate thing. We're bringing back plastic straws. But they're both doing the same thing. So I think that's just something that.
But there, though, I think, and you tell me what you think. There, I would say that in regard to those issues, you are absolutely right. Same is true with the militarism and corporate greed. But when it comes to the plight of our precious trans and gay brothers and lesbian sisters, and also reproductive rights, there is a difference between the hypocritical Democratic Party and the much more conservative right-wing Republican Party. Now, that doesn't mean that in a larger framework, what you're saying, lo and behold, there's certain covert and certain overt in regard to other issues. But you would grant me that in terms of just the plight of we could call them sexual minorities, or those folk who have been so viciously treated over time and space in regard to their sexual orientation, that Biden is better than Trump on those issues.
But even to that issue, when we look at covert, Joe Biden behind closed doors is endorsing Democrat candidates, or has endorsed Democrat candidates that are anti-choice, that are anti-LGBTQ, and he endorses them because they're status quo Democrats, instead of endorsing their opponent that identifies as progressive.
I see what you're saying.
That supports those issues. So like Jessica Cisneros, perfect example. She was running as a progressive against Henry Cuellar. Henry Cuellar is, anti-choice, and all of them just got in line. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, what's that guy's name? Clyburn, sorry, Joe Clyburn. They all got in line and said, we're going to endorse Henry Cuellar because he's the status quo and he's the corporate Democrat. So if they really care about those issues, they would not be supporting those candidates that are against those issues. And that's what I mean about the covert, the sneakiness behind it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see. Well, I'm going to have to think, ponder, and pray on that. That's a powerful, powerful formulation you got there, though. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I have a couple more for you, Dr. West. One
Mhm.
of the questions that comes up, I have to be careful how I talk about this on YouTube because they come in after us with the medical information. So I'm just going to
Mhm.
describe it as pandemic. If you were president and we had another pandemic, how would you handle that? Would you do similarities in reference to lockdowns or mandates, or would you take a different path and why?
Well, one is that I would tell my fellow citizens the truth about how public policy has been disproportionately shaped by the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, and that there has to be a severing of that profit making obsession of that industry with the policies that affect our precious citizens. Now, of course, that's a larger issue because I would already have the pharmaceutical industry so, if not nationalized, under democratic control, that it would be a different setting in that regard. But then I would have a robust conversation among the scientists so that one particular scientific perspective would not become so predominant that it would marginalize other scientific voices in terms of how one proceeds vis-a-vis mandates, vis-a-vis vaccines, or what have you. And so there has to be a much broader critical reflection and conversation about the kinds of policies that would flow therefrom. Now, I wouldn't dictate the policies myself because I would want to learn from the scientists. I've got to have a humility and a modesty in terms of learning from them. But the problem was in the past, it seems to me, is that it was just too easy for the pharmaceutical industry to throw its weight around in terms of profit making orientation to shape the public policy of the government. And that's what needs to be called into question. And even there, I mean, I know RFK Jr. and others, and I love my dear brother. I think on Israel, we really gonna go at it like Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and he's still crazy about capitalism, but free market capitalism, not monopoly capitalism. So I understand, my dear brother. But his preoccupation with this issue, I think he makes some very excessive and extravagant claims. But I think it's very important that voices be heard that are too often marginalized, so that we have a larger, high quality conversation rather than a conversation in which the streamlining of pharmaceutical industry's interests too often is disproportionate in shaping the dialogue. So that's how I would respond to that.
So
Does that
multiple voices, yeah,
does
because
that make
that
sense to you?
yeah, because what we found is that those other voices were censored, whether it was YouTube or Twitter or,
No,
Dr. Malone had his entire account removed from Twitter. So we didn't really get to hear from those other people unless we heard them on Joe Rogan. And then those episodes were removed from Joe Rogan. So
mm-hmm.
hearing from multiple people, I think is a good thing. And you brought up RFK Jr., and that brings me to the other poll. So I did ask people if RFK Jr. lost the primary, should Cornel West and RFK Jr. run together as Greens? And I was really surprised by this poll because this was 1,300, over 1,300 votes. 48% said yes, 34% said no, and 18% said not sure. And I prefaced this by saying if RFK Jr. were to change his position on Israel and Palestine, because I know that is where you two fundamentally disagree. He supports reparations, but he doesn't support the cash payments. I feel like you could change his mind in reference to that too, because he does understand the importance of reparations. But I wanted to show you this and I wanted to get your opinion about that. What do you think about that? If RFK Jr. lost the primary and let's say, and let's say he came around on the Israel and Palestine issue and on changed his position a little bit on the reparations issue, could you see the two of you actually running together?
Well, I've never seen this poll before. I can tell you that definitely. And it's true, the time that we spent together when he was focused on environmental racism and so on, and his precious sister Carrie and the whole family, that we had wonderful time and what have you. but it's just so premature on one hand, and the other hand, I don't know, a ticket West Kennedy. That kind of ebony ivory would be both interesting, but it just never occurred to me. You know what I mean? It just never occurred to me. It really, and of course, it depends on which one's president, which one's vice president. So I was just talking to my dear sister Nina Turner, who I love so deeply, and good God Almighty, just the idea of her being vice presidential material is high cotton in so many ways. But I know she's in a situation now where it's impossible. But I haven't thought about vice president. Now, of course, if he said, well, I would be the vice president, he'd be the president. I said, well, wait. Mick Jagger can't be with James Brown. I thought Mick Jagger got to be VP to James Brown. How we going to work this out, my brother? Let's go have a drink. Let's go have a drink. But no, he's always my brother, even though a lot of people think that he's out there in a lot of different ways. I think he's got a decent heart. He's got a lot of goldenness in him. But I've never seen that poll. And as you know, we just speculate and pontificate and kind of brainstorming in a loving and humorous way. But most importantly, for me, whatever is best for me to serve poor and working people. That's the only reason why I'm running, because this is the last thing I need to be doing at this age of my life.
So that's another question that came my way multiple times this week. Some people were thinking that maybe Nina Turner may run with you because she announced on Twitter that she has an announcement.
Well, she would be magnificent. No, I think that she, because I talked with my dear sister. She's so wise. She's so visionary. And she's like a sister to Anahita, my wife, you know. And so when it comes to just spirits and souls who come together, not just as politicians, but as human beings, that, Nina Turner to me is in that particular category. She really is. But of course, we became comrades because of Brother Bernie, because I had met her before that, both campaigns. But I'm sure there's a number of other visionary folk out there. It's really hard to say. And I've got a long way. First, I've got to get the nomination with my Green brothers and sisters. That's the first thing
I'm thinking far ahead.
I know that's far down the road. I got to get that nomination in August, and I do not take that for granted. But I can tell you one thing, though, that this 5% we have now, I haven't had a public rally. I haven't had a fundraiser. I've just had maybe 150 interviews and podcasts. So I haven't come fully out of the blocks yet. And I've got a number of different stages that I'm going through in this campaign. But the important thing is we're going to be true to the love and courage and integrity that those who came before have poured into us. And if I ever reach the point that when I appear, folk can't see a little of Martin King and Fannie Lou Hamer and Coltrane and Rabbi Heschel and Edward Zaid inside of me, there's time for me to go. It's time for me to go. There's too much West and not enough of the great tradition of the great folk who came before. That's the key. It's like Dizzy Gillespie blowing his horn. If you can't hear Louis and Roy Eldridge, all you hear is Dizzy. Something is wrong. That's my tradition.
I hear you. I have two quick questions in reference to criminal justice. Yes. Tara Reid is basically stuck in Russia right now. She cannot come back to the United States. She's told if she does return that she would probably be arrested. She's one of them. And the other one is these clients of Jeffrey Epstein, so to speak, this book that has not released the names in the book. And every now and then we get another article that we see that is mentioning a couple of people that had dinner with him, right? If you were president, number one, would you allow for Tara Reid to return back to the U.S. and not be arrested and return back to her life in California with her horse and her daughter? And two, in reference to the names with Jeffrey Epstein, would you call for those names to be released?
Well, it would be a question of whether one actually has the presidential power and authority to release those names. Who has authority over those right now? Do you know? I don't know that case well enough.
I would think that the DOJ may have some stake in this somewhere. So you would
Ah,
probably have to
yes,
pressure
I
the
see.
DOJ to
I
pressure the
see.
federal. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I would want the DOJ to have some crucial autonomy, so I wouldn't try to excessively weaponize it the way too many presidents in the past and present have done. But I would say this, though, in terms of incarceration, that my priorities would be the Mumia Abu Jamals and the H. Rap Browns and the Leonard Peltiers and the Snowdens and certainly Julian Assange. Now, I would want to know more about my dear sister who you talked about. But in terms of ensuring that there is a fairness of people who are in places they should not be, same would be true for Sada Shakur. Welcome her from Cuba. That would be my priority. So I would have to look at that case. I think it would be difficult for me to make a decision now. But I know that if I get into the people's house, that the people who have sacrificed so much, who I believe, I'm convinced that they're innocent, who were freedom fighters, who were incarcerated not just to incarcerate them, but to scare people like me and you so that we become accommodating to the status quo because we don't want to be incarcerated or assassinated. So that these
Mm.
things happen to send signs to other folk, to keep them with a complicity and a cowardliness to adjust to the status quo. No, to know that lo and behold, there's possibilities of justice for them. And I would certainly use presidential power for those kinds of pardons. But that would be true for a whole host of cases I know not of at the moment. And I would have to look at each case individually, as you can imagine. Very much so. But the criminal justice system would have to go such fundamental transformation.
Hmm.
Oh my God. But you see, with the abolition of poverty and quality education and quality jobs, you already are speaking to crucial background conditions that produce too much behavior that violates other people's dignity, you see.
Awesome. Dr. West, two things, or one thing I would add
Mm-hmm.
here. On your
Yes.
website, under policies, you have dismantling the empire, where you
Yes.
talk about, military spending, NATO, etc. And then unleashing democracy. You mentioned Medicare for all, decriminalization of drugs, um, housing for all, quality education, free college tuition, jobs and living wages for all. You mentioned reparations, secure the rights for LGBTQ and trans people, etc., and also saving the planet, where you go into the fossil fuel companies. One thing that I would recommend, and again, it's your campaign, but just one thing I would recommend
Mm-hmm.
at the very top: corruption. Number one,
Mm.
weeding out the corruption, whether it's that includes big pharmacy, that puts it all together. That includes big pharma, that includes the militarization of the police, that includes corporate money in politics, calling out these billionaires, calling out, and not just the Jeff Bezos, which is more the obvious one, but calling out people like Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock. These people, a lot of these people, they like to sit in the background, just like the Sackler family. I was just watching that documentary, Dope Sick, about the opioid crisis in this country. The
Yes.
Sackler family should be under the jail. And these kind of people that have that type of wealth, that they're kind of silent, you may see their name in museums, or they may have buildings that are dedicated to them, but you rarely see those face. Those people are the ones that really, really need to be called out. And I think it's easy to call out Jeff Bezos. Everybody knows who he is. It's easy to call
Mm.
out Elon Musk. They know him. For a long time, people did not see the faces of the Sackler family. And Larry Fink don't show his face that much either. So I think corruption would be a good thing to add there as well. Just an idea.
No, I appreciate that. And I tell you, you don't realize how much I learned from your insights in watching your show. And the fact that you have the courage with such style and power to raise your vision and analysis. And so I appreciate that. And I hear exactly what you're saying. But I think you also agree, though, that the corruption has to go hand in hand with fundamental transformation, because we don't want a capitalist society that has just less corruption, but it's still capitalist to the degree to which it's exploitative, so tied to profit that people are always secondary to profit, and basic social needs are secondary to money making. You see what I mean? So that the corruption and the transformation would have to go hand in hand. I know you acknowledge that, but I just want to say that for the audience as well. I hear, and part of that has to do with democratic accountability. You have to be accountable to the people's public flourishing, public welfare, public well-being, you know? And we've lost so much of that in this society. Things public are trashed. It's all privatistic. Other than the army, other than the military, that's still socialist.
That's right. And one more thing, Dr. West. We do call in sometimes. We do like call in like once a week. Some people have asked, like, would you be interested in coming on to call in? It's an app, but you can do a computer with me and letting some of the viewers ask you questions about your campaign.
Would love it. I would. In fact, we can have one and nothing but just call in if you like. That'd be beautiful.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be beautiful. But it's always it's a blessing and a joy to be in conversation with you, because, in all honesty, you know, times are really so grim. Mm-hmm. They are so dim. You know, the gangsters and thugs are more and more taking over, and they're getting normalized and naturalized. People think this is the only way to be in the world, and that's part of the challenge of a third party. You see. The idea of the two-party system has become so naturalized and normalized that we're told there is no alternative ever. Just get used to it. So that the poor and Jamal and Babe Bruh and Ray and all them, they got to get used to just being in the hood forever.
Yep.
And I say, never over my dead body will I ever accept a system where they have to get used to the levels of social misery every day, and people walking around sipping tea as if their plight has no weight in gravitas in the larger collective good. I can't put up with that. No. That's like asking Sam Cooke to sound like Pat Boone. It ain't gonna happen ever.
All right. Well, Dr. West, thank you so much for joining me again. And where can people follow your campaign? Eric, make sure you put the link to the website in the chat too, if you can.
Well, it would be Cornel West office at gmail.com. That would probably be the main one. What would it be, babe? DR.
Cornel West.
Yeah, my wife is. You ought to come say hello. It's a DR Cornel West office. At gmail.com. That's what it is.
That's Sabby?
Yeah, that's Sister Sabby. Yeah. Anahita says hello to you.
Hi. Hi. Ooh, how are you?
There she is.
Good. How are you?
Good. We love your show. We watch you all the time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Indeed. We just had our anniversary yesterday. Listen to a little Tony in the Glenn Jones version too.
Oh, happy late anniversary.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
nice. It was nice.
All right.
All right. Salute you now.
Good seeing you.
Salute you.
Bye-bye.
Indeed. And God bless your loved ones, your family, your precious family.
Thank you so much. You too, Dr. West.
Definitely. Take good care now.
Bye.